the 5th-ranked Fighting Illini rolled in to challenge the number 1 Lady Vols. 2 sisters, Taja, a sophomore playing for Illinois University, and Tamika, a freshman playing for the University of Tennessee, are poised to continue the competitive rivalry that has lasted a lifetime. Would blood be shed on the court tonight as it did many years ago during their one-on-ones on the driveway? Those concrete battles became so brutal, their father, former NBA player Harvey Catchings, had to take the ball away. Her dad later in her life would say he believed one of the big reasons Tamika became such a prolific basketball player was because of all those years spent playing against her older sister, Taja. Taja and Tamika are best friends. When Tamika, a freshman in high school, made the varsity team and played alongside Taja, they weren't just Taja and Tamika anymore. They became the Catchings sisters. And since high school, they promised each other they'd play together again in college. So you can see tonight's battle wasn't exactly what they had in mind. Tamika had a dream to play for Tennessee one day for the GOAT, Coach Pat Summitt. Tamika first saw her on TV in 8th grade. Those steely blue eyes seemed to stare right back at her.
I was completely mesmerized and even a little afraid.
When it was time to officially select a university to attend, Tamika knew it would be an important step to reach her dreams and goals. But she was also torn between wanting to play with her sister. Taja told her,
"Don't come here for me. Come here only if you want to be here. I'm okay with you going where you want to go."
Tamika knew all right. It was the University of Tennessee. The Lady Vols hadn't lost a game all year, coming in at 9-0. The Fighting Illini were 4-2. The highly anticipated game finally tipped off. Illinois stormed out and took control of the game in the first half. They were a big and strong team, and everything was falling for them. Pat Summitt wrote of the first half,
"We couldn't shoot a basketball into the ocean. Everything we put up seemed to clang off the rim. We were in a funk."
Tennessee trailed by 17 points at halftime. Tamika and the team expected a tirade from Coach Summitt, but she was unusually restrained. Coach thought that the truth was that it would be good for the team to lose a couple of games. She said,
"Losing strengthened you. It revealed your weaknesses so you could fix them. If we don't lose a game, I don't see how we can win a title."
She asked the team,
"What are we not doing?"
The team answered in unison, rebounding.
"Well, it can't get any worse. You can still win this game. Take it one possession at a time. I'll tell you this much, if we're going down fighting."
Just before the team headed out to start the second half, assistant coach Al Brown pulled Tamika aside and told her, "The game is going to come to you. Just relax." The Lady Vols hit the floor hard in the second half. Shamiqua Holdsclaw, the best player in the NCAA, had been called the Michael Jordan of college basketball. She even wore that famous number 23. She scored 4 quick points, prompting Illinois to call a timeout. The lead had quickly been cut down to 13 points. When the Illini inbounded the ball, the Lady Vols pressed hard. Coach Summitt herself felt claustrophobic watching the stifling defense they displayed. The game began to tip back and forth. Illinois regained some momentum and went up by 18 points with 12 minutes, 32 seconds left on the clock. Time was running out. The Illini were exhausted. Kyra Elzy, a sophomore forward, noticed some of the Illinois players were leaned over, pulling at their shorts. The sure sign of someone who is trying to catch her breath and can't quite do it. Kyra smelled blood. It's our time to go. It's our time to go now. Kelly Jolly, a junior guard, kept chanting, "Steal and score, steal and score, steal and score." Tennessee was coming back. Kelly stole the ball away from the Illinois inbounds pass and quickly drove to the hoop and scored. The deficit was down to single digits. In the next 10 seconds, Tamika would deflect another inbounds pass, setting up a three-pointer for Kelly Jolly. Swish. The Illinois lead was cut down to 6 points. The score, 50-44. There was pandemonium in the arena. Next, it was Tamika Randall, a freshman guard, tipped the ball away from an Illinois player, while Kyra Elsie lunged for the ball and passed it up court to Tamika for a layup. 4. The next play, Tamika helped force a turnover with the help of Teresa Tree Jeter, a freshman center, for another drive to the basket. 2. In 3 minutes, Tennessee forced 10 turnovers. The momentum could not be stopped now. The score now 53-52. Tamika was fouled and managed to sink both free throws to take the lead. As much as an 18-point deficit was gone. The Lady Vols scored a few more baskets, with the score 56-53. And in just 11 minutes, they outscored Illinois 32-12. Tennessee did not let up, with Tamika blocking a pass from her sister Taja and taking it coast to coast for another Tennessee layup. The score now 62-53. Coach Summit sat back and allowed herself to be amazed. The buzzer sounded and the score was 78-68 for the Lady Vols. The stat sheet showed that Shamiqua Holdsclaw scored 19 points. Tamika Randall got 13, Kelly Jolly had 10, and Tamika Catchings had a double-double, a career-high 20 points and 13 rebounds. This team would go on to have a historic year. This was a huge step and a gut check for the 1997-98 Lady Vols basketball team. And this would not be the last career night for Tamika Catchings. Welcome to Fire and White, a podcast about legends of women's basketball. By the 7th grade, Tamika Catchings knew basketball was what she was going to do with her life. Her mother would always tell her,
You can do anything you set your mind to and work toward. The sky's the limit.
Tamika had all of the confidence in the world. She made a goal of making it into the NBA. She grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and wrote it down. One day, I'll be in the NBA. She pinned the paper to her bathroom mirror. Every day, she says, when she woke up, that it was the first thing she saw. The court became a place of peace for her, safe from the turmoil that surrounded her life. Not only did she dominate when she was out there on the court, she began to really love the game. She says some have fun playing the game of basketball, but if you love the game, you see and appreciate what it does for you inside. This was no more apparent than in her intense one-on-ones with her sister in the family driveway.
Later in my life, my dad would say the one reason I got so good was because of all those early years playing against Taja.
Their games would consist of a lot of fighting for the ball, defending tough, scraping and scrapping to get the edge and score. They'd play so physically, they'd scrape their arms, knees, then wipe off a little blood and keep the game going. But while their dad was in the house, he'd heard one scream too many and knew there had to be some blood. Harvey walked out onto the porch and yelled, "That's enough!" He took the ball, and Taja stormed up to her room. The game was over. Well, not really. A little while later, as Harvey tells it, he looked up from his paper and wondered where Tamika was. Taja was up in her room, but Tamika had never come in. He got up and walked to the window and peeked outside.
Looking outside, he saw me in the driveway, and there I was, playing with an imaginary basketball. He watched me dribble my invisible ball behind my back, through my legs, then toward the basket, where I'd launch myself for an imaginary layup.
She'd walk back to the end of the driveway and play out another scenario in her head, over and over. She could hear the game in her head, different from what she could hear for real. Here in this sanctuary, playing in silence, was where she could hide and hear what she wanted to hear. Basketball was her game. She endured teasing and bullying growing up because she wore glasses and these brown, matchbox-sized amplifying devices behind her ears. But by the 3rd grade, Tamika had had enough of those hearing aids. And one day while walking home from school, she chucked them into a meadow. She never told her mother, but eventually her mother did notice, and they all went out looking for them. Tamika made sure they were never found. Without her amplifying devices, the world was a whisper to Tamika. It was later designated to be sensorineural hearing loss, and it was most likely congenital. This kind of hearing loss prevented her from hearing some tones and pitches, and the ones she had the most trouble hearing were those in voices. Tamika had made it through the majority of her life without being able to hear a lot of what was said to her. She made up for it so well that people didn't even notice.
I began then what I still do now when I'm faced with a challenge. I dug in with determination. I adjusted. I worked harder. I took each of these steps one at a time.
Sports, particularly basketball, for Tamika had become the one place where she didn't feel so miserable. She could fit in, whether it be on the court, the field, or in the driveway.
The more I played basketball,
Tamika explained,
the more I realized how my hearing loss became my secret weapon. Basketball is a sign language, after all. Not only the intentional head nods and hand signals, but the unintentional body language of players in motion that told my searching eyes what the player would do.
One of those secret weapons was her discovery of her ability to anticipate. Later in her WNBA career, when she and the Indiana Fever were vying for a championship against the Minnesota Lynx, she talked about the phrase, letting the game come to you. When you let the game come to you, you are allowing yourself the time and opportunity to figure out the team's strategy. With Tamika's own secret weapon and her ability to anticipate, it's safe to say the game often came to her quickly. Her other secret, not so secret, weapons were her unmatched hard work approach, and as many coaches in the WNBA put it, her relentlessness. But to be absolutely clear, despite her hard work, coping techniques, and passion for the game, she was one of the best scorers, defenders, and complete players the game has ever seen. Her first head coach in the WNBA, Nell Fortner, said, "A lot of players are talented. Everybody can shoot, everybody can rebound. But it comes down to how bad do you want it? There's just a relentlessness to Tamika's game that really blows you away." Indiana Fever coach Lynn Dunn, from 2008 to 2014, exclaimed, "The face of the Fever is Tamika Catchings. She is my kind of player, relentless in her pursuit of excellence. Determined and dedicated, she defends and rebounds with a passion unequaled." Clearly, a player who is a 2-time high school state champion in 2 different states, NCAA champion, 4-time gold medalist, 5-time Defensive Player of the Year, WNBA MVP, WNBA champion, and Hall of Famer is truly special.
Dear Tamika, I want you to know and believe that no one in America can stop you.
Before the NCAA tournament began each year, Coach Summitt would write each of her players a personal note, something special and specific to each one. This was yet another affirmation and confirmation of Tamika's greatness and sheer dominance. Her high school coach, Coach Sarah Hackerott, had told her a year previous, "When the ball comes to you," she said, "take it to the basket. They can't stop you." Coach Summitt created the schedule of games every year for her team, with the intention of putting the team through a tough and grueling season. She wanted her team to be tested by the strongest teams throughout the country, because she wasn't coaching for the season. She was coaching them for the tournament and winning the championship. The 1997-98 season was one of the toughest schedules she ever created.
In the 1997-98 Lady Vols, I finally met a group of players more driven than I am. They were harder on themselves than I ever could have been. That was clear the moment they stepped on campus.
The 1997-98 Lady Vols were 33-0, a perfect regular season and SEC Conference regional tournament. One of a handful of games where Tennessee was predicted to lose was against Louisiana Tech, their first of a 5-game stretch in 9 days. The Lady Techsters had a rich history of excellence and a winning culture. They had an impressive run in the 80s, winning the 1981, 82, and 88 national championships. The Lady Techsters featured players such as center Alyssa Burress, who earned Sun Belt Player of the Year this season, and forward Monica Maxwell were real threats on the court. Louisiana Tech came out strong, quickly leading 11-4. Their star players were showing out. After a Tennessee timeout, Coach Summit made a few subs and sent the players back on the court. The Lady Vols worked hard to narrow the deficit, and by halftime, the score was 36-35, favoring the Lady Techsters. This time, Coach Summit was not restrained. Pat lit into the team for playing without confidence. She said something, however, that stuck with the players.
Let your defense be your offense.
The Lady Vols were ready to come out from halftime and take control of the game, but that's not exactly what happened. The Lady Techsters came out on fire, quickly taking a 6-point lead. Coach Summit had to think of something. She swiftly subbed in Teresa Tree-Jeter into the game. Alyssa Burress got the ball and drove hard to the basket, as she had the entire game. Everyone in the arena thought, here she goes again, extending the lead. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Tree elevated into the air and swatted the shot away. Everyone in the arena paused, caught up in the awe of what just happened. Thompson Bowling Arena erupted. Tree would get 5 blocks for the game. The momentum was shifting. The next Louisiana Tech trip down the court found Alyssa Burress with the ball again. She muscled her way into the lane and tossed a shot up. And Tree elevated again and blocked it away. Coach then subbed Samika Randall and Kristen Ace Clement. All 4 freshmen, dubbed the Fab Four, were in the game and had come to play, with Tamika leading the way with 17 points. They went on a 12-0 run. And then came the knockout punch. After Coach subbed Shamiqua Holtzclaw, the best player in college basketball, the lead rose to 10, with the final score resulting at 75-61. The New York Times would write of this team, beyond Tennessee's statistical dominance lies an aggressive, attacking style that has redefined the women's game. The 1997-98 Lady Vols were 33-0, a perfect regular season and SEC Conference Regional Tournament. Coming into the NCAA tournament, Tennessee believed that they could beat anybody, because they had beaten everybody. But they also knew there was always a chance that something could sabotage their championship dreams, such as injury, disciplinary problems, fatigue, a slow start to a game, or foul trouble. Tennessee survived the tournament through the Final Four and into the championship game. They breezed through their rounds, but one opponent almost proved to be the team to defeat them: North Carolina. Originally, Tamika had thought she would have another showdown with her sister Taja in the tournament, but North Carolina prevailed with a narrow margin. With a close back-and-forth game, the Lady Vols at one point were down by 12, but that was quickly erased by a full team effort, and they would win by 6. After beating their opponent in the Final Four, they were going to the championship, and it was going to be against an opponent they were all too familiar with. Coming into the championship game, Tamika had averaged 18 points per game, while Shamiqua Holtzclaw, later to be named NCAA's most outstanding player, was averaging 23.4 points, and Samika Randall 16.1 points. They were dubbed the Three Meeks, and they were ready to show out in the championship game. A rematch, Louisiana Tech. The Lady Techsters had Tennessee's number in the 80s, defeating the Lady Vols in the Final Four in both 1982 and 1988, where Louisiana Tech won it all in both of those years. This year, Tennessee got their revenge and handily beat the Lady Techsters, taking a lead early and never letting up. A perfect 39-0 season. The next year, they didn't go undefeated, but they had a 22-game win streak. They entered the tournament as favorites, but didn't even make it to the Final Four, losing to Duke in the Elite Eight. Shamiqua was graduating and would be picked number 1 overall by the Washington Mystics. Tamika's role on the team would be different, and the Three Meeks were down to 2. Coach Summit told her, now that Shamiqua is gone, they're going to be gunning for you. You're the All-American. You're going to get banged up, and they'll be double and triple teaming you. You have to rise above. Tamika learned valuable lessons to when being the go-to player was needed, to take the shot, face the pressure, and step up, and when to be a team player. In Tamika's junior year, Tennessee went 31-3, losing their first game to Louisiana Tech, but averaging nearly 80 points per game. They won the tournament by double digits each game to face their arch rival, UConn, in the championship. These two previously met in the 1995 NCAA championship, UConn coming out on top 70-64. UConn was led by a strong starting 5, featuring players Sue Bird and one of Tamika's future rivals in the WNBA, Swin Cash. Whistle blows, center Michelle Snow lines up for the tip-off. Tennessee gains control and pushes up to Tamika for the easy lay-in.
Long for Catchings off the tip.
The Lady Vols were the first to strike. UConn brought the ball up the court, moving the ball really well. They found an opening down low, but Kara Lawson came out of nowhere and swatted the shot out of bounds. Tennessee had come out aggressive and ready to win, but UConn was also a force to be reckoned with. UConn played persistent defense, forcing turnovers and pushing the ball up the court and converting it to points. At halftime, the score was 43-37 for UConn. At about the 15-minute mark, the score was 52-44 for UConn. Little did the Lady Vols know, they would only score 8 more points. UConn ran away with the game to win the championship, 71-52, despite the leading score of the night, Tamika Catchings' efforts with 16 points. Tamika also won Naismith College Player of the Year, being voted in by the top coaches, sports media, and the fans across the country. Tamika had truly become the number 1 option. Tamika was coming into her senior year, and by now, the WNBA had a few seasons under their belt. And Tamika's goal, pinned to the bathroom mirror, had changed from when she made it so many years ago in the 7th grade. It was now, one day, I'll be in the WNBA. She had a lot of confidence she would be among those projected to be top picks, with the likes of Jackie Stiles, Katie Douglas, Lauren Jackson, and Kelly Miller. But in Tamika's mind, her focus had to be on playing games now and winning for Tennessee. They'd win their first 11 games, halting the win streak against no other than UConn themselves. They won the next 4 and then were to play Mississippi State. It was a cloudy day in Knoxville, and the Lady Vols came out slow, resulting in being down the entire first half. After halftime, however, they came out firing and ended up being up by 10. Mississippi State started to claw their way back, and Tamika began to take over the game. On one play, she raced up the floor, shook her defender, and flew to the basket.
Going up, I felt something in my knee. My strength rushed out of my leg. I lost upward momentum, and the ball never had a chance. I came down in a heap, writhing in pain.
Tamika had torn her ACL and was carted off the court. With her season ended, she knew she would never suit up for Path Summit and the Lady Vols ever again. There were also major implications regarding her future WNBA career. Secaucus, New Jersey, April 20th, 2001. It was the 6th ever WNBA draft. Despite Tamika's injury, she was invited to attend. She had mixed feelings toward being there. She wanted to be excited, letting it all sink in. After all, this was the culmination of all her resilience and dreams since 1992, when she posted her goal of making it to the NBA one day, and then changing it once the WNBA had begun. But there was a lot of unease, anxiousness, and frustration under all of that. She felt that she was used and broken, and WNBA teams would be more interested in a player who hadn't been severely injured. With the first pick of the WNBA draft, the Seattle Storm select Lauren Jackson. No surprise. With the second pick of the WNBA draft, the Charlotte Sting select Kelly Miller. Tamika felt she was in for a long, disappointing night. With the third pick of the WNBA draft, the Indiana Fever select Tamika Catchings from the University of Tennessee. She couldn't believe she'd been picked third, and the first regular draft pick of the Indiana Fever in their history. There was a frantic schedule ahead for Tamika. The Fever would start training camp in a couple of weeks, and the WNBA season would start on May 31st. Of course, Tamika would be watching and not playing, but her sights were set on making her Fever debut in 2002. A few months later in July, Tamika was cleared to run, but only in straight lines. Shortly after that, Tamika joined the team for her first road trip, where the Fever would go up against the dynasty of the early WNBA, the Houston Comets. Tamika was going to be involved with team activities during practice, although limited, of course. She was soaking up every minute. But when she was walking out to the court, she felt a tugging in her knee. A sharp pain started in her knee and ran down her leg. Panic seized Tamika. An immeasurable dread and terror scratched at her inside. She found her trainer and explained the pain she was having. And after getting checked out, she discovered she had torn her meniscus. Another injury, another setback, and more time off the court. In early 2002, Tamika would have another chance at playing. She was a little nervous, but had rehabbed and worked hard to return. The WNBA season wouldn't start until May 25th that year. However, the Chicago Blaze of the National Women's Basketball League was starting up, and Tamika was going to have a chance to play in her hometown. And then in March, tryouts were being held in Houston for the United States women's national basketball team. Making this team, which would represent the U.S. at the FIBA World Championships in China that year, would give her a chance at making the U.S. Olympic team in 2 years. Van Chancellor, coach of the U.S. team and coach of the Houston Comets, was hesitant to invite Tamika to try out because of her injury history. His reluctance was short-lived. Tamika's hustle, resilience, skill, and passion for the game would earn her a spot on the team and cause Van Chancellor to regret his reluctance. Tamika was back on the court. For the last 4 years it's been, beat the Americans, beat the Americans. Australian star Lauren Jackson said at the 2004 Olympics in Athens, Greece. The last time the Opals showed up at the gold medal game was in Sydney, and they came away with silver. Tamika was in the starting five for the final game. She said that her biggest role with the team was defense, and Coach Van Chancellor always put her on the best opposing players. She would lead the world in steals with 2.9 per game along with Hanna Horakova from the Czech Republic. This powerhouse U.S. team was loaded with experienced legends and young stars, notably Lisa Leslie, Cheryl Swoops, and Dawn Staley, with Tamika, Diana Taurasi, and Sue Bird.
At the Olympic Games, I watched Dawn Staley in action and learned what it takes to be a true leader.
Dawn pulled her aside and said, "Catch, you just have to play your game. I know it's easier said than done, but we need you. If you do your part, then we're going to win." Tamika was already in the middle of her third year in the WNBA. She had won Rookie of the Year, was a 2-time All-Star, and had finished second in MVP voting the year previous. The MVP that year was Lauren Jackson. This game was a collision course for two of the world's premier talents in the game of basketball. The first half was a defensive battle. Both teams were playing aggressively, and the intensity was at an all-time high. Both teams remained unbeaten until this very day. No one wants the silver. Tina Thompson opened the scoreboard for the U.S. with a three-pointer and showcased her high-level skill and unparalleled footwork throughout the game. Lisa Leslie was truly elegant, refined, and calculated in the way she operated on the court. Everything was played at her pace. Tamika was doing all of the dirty work that game that isn't always shown on the stat sheet. She was all over the court. She was jumping and diving for loose balls, flying through the air for rebounds and tips, and altering shots. Gino Ariema, Tamika's Olympic head coach in 2012 and 2016, said, "She just plays harder than everyone else." This was manifested when, in the second quarter, she planted on a pivot so hard that her shoe literally flew off. The U.S. were never down until about a minute into the third quarter. The Opals came out hitting three-pointers, drawing fouls, and causing the U.S. to turn the ball over. Dawn Staley, who got into foul trouble early in the game, and Tina Thompson willed the U.S. back into the game, with Tamika pulling down rebounds and setting screens. While Lauren Jackson couldn't get anything to fall, Susie Batkovich and Penny Taylor brought Australia back and took the lead. But with a three-pointer by Diana Taurasi, the U.S. had the lead going into the fourth quarter, and they never gave it back. Her mother, Wanda Catchings, and Taja were there to cheer her on and would watch as Tamika won 3 more gold medals in Beijing, London, and Rio. The U.S. women's Olympic basketball team had won its 3rd gold medal in a row and would go on to win the next 4. At the time of this recording, the U.S. will be playing in Paris at this year's Summer Olympics in 2024. At the All-Star Game in 2006 in Madison Square Garden, Tamika received the most votes to be in her 4th All-Star Game, but couldn't play due to a stubborn heel injury. She would also win her 2nd Defensive Player of the Year award in a row. She racked up 5 of those throughout her career, and she would often think of her one and only run-in with Coach Summit 9 years earlier, when Coach attempted to teach a defiant freshman how to play proper defense. At halftime, Catch was selected to the WNBA's 10th anniversary All-Decade team, along with other legends and friends such as Dawn Staley, Cheryl Swoops, and Lisa Leslie. Star player of the Connecticut Sun, Katie Douglas, would win All-Star Game MVP and finish 2nd in Defensive Player of the Year voting behind Tamika Catchings. She would play 1 more year for the Sun, then in 2008, in one of the biggest trades in WNBA history, the Fever would trade Tamika Whitmore to the Sun in exchange for Douglas. The Fever had its best start to a season in its history in 2007, going 16-4. They really started building a powerful team with the addition of Tammy Sutton-Brown, who would become one of Tamika's best friends. Midway through the season, however, Tamika would be plagued by another injury, a partial tear of her plantar fascia, and the Fever would end the season with a lackluster 5-9. But they made it into the playoffs and would face the Connecticut Sun in the first round for a best-of-3. Game 1 was an absolute classic. The game went 3 overtimes, the first in a WNBA playoff game, with the Sun ultimately coming out on top. The Sun would lead at the end of each quarter, and by the fourth, the Fever clawed their way back slowly. They were chipping away at our lead, got closer and closer, and then it became a possessions game, Katie Douglas said. The Fever would fire back in Game 2, winning by 19 points. Catch recorded a double-double, and the Fever's Anna DeForge scored 26 points. They would meet again 2 days later in Conesco Fieldhouse in Indianapolis for the deciding game. "Y'all quiet over here today," Katie Douglas yelled to the stands. There was 6 minutes, 35 seconds left in the second quarter, and the Sun were up 39-17. Other Sun players joined in with the trash talking.
We didn't like that.
The Sun won all 5 games against the Fever throughout the regular season. And being up by 22 already, they felt pretty good about their chances tonight to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. There was a lot of ground to cover for the Fever to keep their playoff hopes alive. They knew they weren't going to erase a 22-point deficit in one possession. One bucket and one stop at a time. The Fever managed to get the game to 44-32 by halftime and kept that mentality of just chipping away slowly, one possession at a time. With 8 minutes, 47 seconds left in the fourth quarter, Lindsay Whalen, Olympic gold medalist, WNBA champion, and Hall of Famer, hit a long jumper, and the score was 64-48. The Sun held on tightly to the lead with white knuckles, but the Fever refused to give up. The Fever dug deep and went on an 11-0 run for the next 2.5 minutes to shrink the Sun's lead to just 5 points. Asha Jones of the Sun got an offensive rebound and made a layup to end the drought. The defense became so intense, and the stakes of the game were so high that both teams had a hard time getting a bucket. Tamika rose up to pull down a defensive rebound and was fouled by Jones. Indiana called a timeout with 3 minutes, 53 seconds to go in the game. The score was still 66-59. The Fever inbounded the ball, and Tamika quickly hit a mid-range jumper. On the other end of the court, DeForge steals a pass, throws it down to Tamika, who assists the other Tamika Whitmore, for a 3. The score now, 66-64. There was no stopping Indiana now. This game was anyone's now. After another steal by DeForge from a Whalen pass, Indiana called another timeout. 2 minutes, 43 seconds left on the clock. Out of the timeout, Whitmore made an and one and sank the free throw. The Fever took the lead for the first time since 7 minutes, 45 seconds in the first quarter. The Fever and the Sun would trade leads, and with 5.8 seconds on the clock, Catch was fouled and knocked down both free throws. The score 77-75 for the Fever. Katie Douglas, remembering the trash she talked in the second quarter, was not going to go down easy. And with 1.3 seconds in the game, she hit a layup to force the game into overtime. Overtime was tight, but the Fever remained focused, gained the lead, and Catch scored the last 3 points to ice the game. The Fever, led by Tamika's 30 points, 13 rebounds, and 6 assists, had just made WNBA playoff history. No one had erased a 22-point deficit in a playoff game before. The previous record was held by the Minnesota Lynx in 2003, coming back from a 21-point deficit against the Los Angeles Sparks. When they got stops, they were doing what we were doing to them the first 3 quarters, Katie Douglas said after the game. They were running it down our throats in transition, getting easy baskets and getting confidence. These were Tamika's first 3 games back from her plantar fascia tear, averaging 19.7 points and 15.3 rebounds for the series. The Eastern Conference Finals were going to be against the Detroit Shock, the Fever's arch nemesis. They just had to win 2 more games and they were finally going to reach the finals. The Fever took Game 1, then lost big to Detroit in Game 2. 1 game, 40 minutes, and with a win, the Fever were going to the finals. With under a minute to go in the second quarter, the score, 35-30, Catch had the ball and took a jab step and launched left. She fell to the floor and felt as if someone was kicking her. She looked back and there was no one there. She was helped off the court and it was later determined that she had torn her Achilles. Her recovery forced her to be out for 6 months. The Shock won by 16 points and the Fever's season was over. – 2008 was a year of change and new faces for Catch and the Fever. Lynn Dunn, who had many years of experience in high-level basketball, and having spent the last 4 years as an assistant coach for the Fever, was promoted to head coach. Another new face was a familiar one, and for Fever players and Fever fans, she wasn't too popular. She was a highly respected and great player in the WNBA, but was always on the other side of the battlefield over the years. 5-time All-Star, All-WNBA player, Katie Douglas was traded to the Fever in one of the biggest trades in WNBA history. Katie and Tamika did not get along right away, and there were worries as to whether the chemistry between the two would work on the court. There was no more time to wait to get to the finals. The time was now. It was determined that the two would go to counseling together to a sports psychologist. Yes, they actually did this. But things didn't quite click right away, and the Fever had a tough year, finishing the season 17-17 and barely squeaked into the playoffs, eventually losing in 3 games to none other than the formidable Detroit Shock. The turning point, however, for this all-star tandem was in the offseason leading into the 2009 WNBA season. Douglas was playing overseas for a team in Turkey, and they needed another good player. The team here needs a good player. I was thinking of you. Why don't you come here and play on the team with me? Douglas said on a call. Catch would take her up on that, and they ended up developing a close relationship. 2009 rolled along, and the Fever had the best team of its history. They headed into the playoffs and were matched up with the Washington Mystics. They handled business and won the series easily, 2-0. In the Eastern Conference Finals, the Fever would have to go through Detroit again. They lost Game 1 but trusted the process and won the next 2, taking the series. The Fever were headed to their first ever WNBA Finals.
I've been waiting for this for 8 years. I don't want to get too excited. I want to finish it off,
Catch said after the game. The matchup was set. The Fever would face an offensive juggernaut, the Phoenix Mercury. This team had a big 3, nicknamed the Three-Headed Scoring Monster, led by WNBA MVP Diana Taurasi, with Cappie Pondexter and Penny Taylor. Also, Rookie of the Year runner-up and winner of 6th Player of the Year award, DeWanna Bonner was on the team. Game 1 was a classic, considered one of the greatest games in WNBA history. The game went to 3 overtimes. The Fever's Katie Douglas poured in 30 points, and Ebony Hoffman dominated with 27 points and 8 rebounds. But it wasn't enough. Diana Taurasi and Cappie Pondexter had quiet nights, even though they both scored over 20 points. But it was Dewana Bonner and Penny Taylor who were the difference makers in this game. The score was 120 to 116 for the Mercury by the time the buzzer sounded at the end of the third overtime. The Fever were still hungry and came out in Game 2 and 3 to win close games, Catch averaging 16.5 points, 9.5 assists, and 10.5 rebounds. The Fever were one win away from their first title. The Mercury weren't done yet, however, winning Game 4 decisively, despite Catchings' 24 points and 12 rebounds. Game 5. Catch had played stellar defense on Taurasi throughout the series so far, but she would show out in Game 5. This team had championship experience and pedigree, and it would ultimately tip the scales for them. With 3 minutes 49 seconds left in the fourth quarter, Tamika passed to Jessica Davenport, coming off the bench scoring 18 points, to make the game 82 to 83, favoring the Mercury. But as time wound down, the Mercury held strong, Taurasi and Pondexter leading the team to its second WNBA title in 3 years. This was devastating for the Fever, who had come so close. They knew how hard and rare it was to get here. This series was so good for the WNBA, however, sparking great interest in providing some of the best basketball ever witnessed by the league. "We came so close in 2009 that you could taste it," said Dunn. And Tamika, she could taste it. And then it was like, oh no, it just slipped away. And then as we continued to grow as a team, you started to wonder, would it happen for us? Years ago, when Tamika was selected to the All-Decade team in 2006, while spending time with the other legends, she remembered,
They were talking about everybody's championships, and I just remember thinking I just kind of felt like the loser of the group because I didn't have one yet.
the next few years, the Fever would put up good regular season records, but would not advance to the finals, losing to the New York Liberty in the first round in 2010 and the Atlanta Dream in the Eastern Conference Finals in 2011. At the end of the 2011 regular season, the WNBA had voted Tamika Most Valuable Player, and yet that somehow wasn't enough. Before the 2012 season, Coach Dunn wanted to meet with Tamika at lunch to talk about a change she wanted to make for the season. "Tamika," Coach started, "I want to move you from playing the 3 to the 4. Coach said she felt that as a small forward, Tamika was sometimes stuck in the corners and wasn't getting involved in enough plays. With putting Catch to the power forward position, Coach felt that with her strength and quickness, she would be able to cook down low. Tamika, however, wasn't so sure. She loved the freedom the small forward position gave her, and she had worked so hard at honing her craft and excelling there for over 15 years. Then Coach continued, "I want you to be a point forward. I think you can bring the ball up the court, start the play, then slide down to the post as power forward. Their power forward won't move high and play you when you bring the ball up, and you're stronger than their guards." Catch could do that. The summer of 2012 was another Olympic gold medal win for the women's team, and Tamika's third. The season picked back up in August, and it wasn't all of the winning the Fever were doing that was remarkable, but it was the way they were winning. Each night, someone else would step up, whether that be Catch, Katie Douglas, Breanne January, or Shavonte Zealous. The game didn't rely just on Tamika to play D, or Katie to score anymore, but more of a collective effort by the team. Tamika explains that it's gotta be all 5 players on the court that have the dream of how they are going to play together to win.
If football is rock music and baseball is classical music, then basketball is jazz. Jazz is an ensemble of people improvising all at the same time, each doing her own thing but together. That's what makes it hard. On the court, you need to do what you need to do best, but do it in rhythm with everyone else. In 2012, the Fever played some pretty good jazz.
The Fever would have to run through tough series en route to the finals. Atlanta and Connecticut and Minnesota, all of which had the Fever's number all year. As they were going to clinch the Eastern Conference Finals against the Sun, Katie Douglas went up for a floater and went to kiss it off the glass when she came down awkwardly on her left ankle, severely injuring it, taking her out for the rest of the season. Douglas and the team were devastated, and without her leadership, grit, and elite scoring ability, the Fever would already be at a huge disadvantage before tip-off of Game 1. The Minnesota Lynx, who had 4 2011 All-Stars on the team in Maya Moore, Simone Augustus, Lindsay Whalen, and Rebecca Brunson, were aiming to be repeat champions, the first since Lisa Leslie and the Sparks did almost 10 years previous. The Fever only had Tamika Catchings and Katie Douglas, and the Fever would have to go through Minnesota without Douglas. Tamika was a great leader and friend. She told Katie,
You helped us get this far. This right here is a product of what we all started together.
Earlier, I mentioned Catch's secret weapons, and one was her resilience and unmatched effort. Game 3 in Indianapolis? Check this out. The series was tied 1-1, and Game 3 was a slaughter. The score was 70-33 for the Fever. Yes, you heard that right. Cheryl Reeve, coach of the Lynx, called a timeout. We have to match Catchings' intensity. She's playing so much harder than anybody on the floor. Tamika Catchings and the Fever have been here before in 2009. Up 2-1 at home, ready to clinch their first finals win. And they came up short. The Fever looked a little different, however, notably the acquisition of Shavonte Zealous from the Shock, and the loss of Ebony Hoffman, who performed brilliantly in the 2009 finals.
You can play great, you can have a great career, but people remember championships. We do what got us here. We defend, we rebound, and we attack.
Catchings was leading the finals with 21.3 points per game and 6.7 rebounds. But the Fever would have their hands full with Maya Moore and Lindsay Whalen. Minnesota breaks open the scoreboard in front of a sellout Indiana crowd with a Taj McWilliams Franklin lay-in. And on the next possession, Catch flings it over to Shavonte Zealous for a mid-range jumper. And the Fever kept their foot on the gas, Catch hitting a step-back 3 to go on a 13-0 run. She wasn't going to lose this one. At the half, the Fever led by 8, and Catch said after the game,
We knew we had to go get it.
The Fever came out with a Catchings-led 9-4 run. They knew the next 20 minutes would define them. Her father Harvey and her idol, coach, and friend Pat Summitt were there to witness Tamika Catchings' ascent to the top, winning her first finals and finals MVP.
This represented so much in my life. Working hard, fighting to be the best. It was all about our hanging in there through 10 years of ups and downs, climbing the mountain each year, only to be disappointed, It meant getting to the final ascent and then pulling ourselves up to the very top, finally able to look around and see what we accomplished. Even as a young girl, I knew basketball was going to be my game. A lot of people have physical ability to play, height and agility, but to play well at a high level requires more. Intensity, desire, passion, focus, determination.
Tamika Catchings was intensity, desire, passion, focus, and determination personified. The Fever remained among the most competitive teams in the East, but in 2014, Catch pinched a nerve in her back, missing the majority of the 2014 season. At the end of that season, after losing to the Chicago Sky in the Eastern Conference Finals, she announced she would retire after 2 more seasons in the WNBA. With 2 more seasons to go in her WNBA career, Catchings said she wanted to go back to the basics and learn how to shoot all over again. Throughout her years in the WNBA, she had studied the shooting techniques of Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, and Steph Curry. She started working with Marvin Doc Harvey and admitted,
"For me, I have a grimace on my face. It's like a shot for me is just such hard work."
her training focused on the balanced movements to help her shoot with higher efficiency. In 2015, under new head coach Stephanie White, the Fever busted through the playoffs for a rematch with the Lynx in the finals. Indiana looked a little different, however. Katie Douglas had returned to the Connecticut Sun, and shooting guard Marissa Coleman joined her teammate Catch at the All-Star game. She would have to go up against the 3 All-Star heavy hitters, Maya Moore, Simone Augustus, and Lindsay Whalen, and future WNBA MVP Sylvia Fowles. It was a hard-fought series. Catch averaged 12.2 points and 8 rebounds a game, and Minnesota's Maya Moore with 19 points and 7.8 rebounds. Sylvia Fowles would win Finals MVP after the Minnesota Lynx clinched the series. "2016 was Catch's final season in the WNBA. It was commemorated with a legacy tour hosted in every WNBA city. She used this as an opportunity to raise money and awareness of the Catch the Stars Foundation, a foundation that's geared toward providing positive academic, youth development, and fitness-related programs for at-risk youth. Thousands of dollars were raised.
I want to be remembered on the court for the passion that I play with, and for the love that I have of the game, and the way that I play 110% all day, every day."
Tamika Catchings ended her career with a legacy cemented as one of the greatest ever to play the game. She retired as the league's number 2 scorer and rebounder, and number 1 in steals and free throws, as well as playoff games, postseason points, rebounds, free throws, steals, double-doubles, and minutes played. At the time of this recording, Catch is 3rd all-time scoring in rebounds with 7,380 points and 3,316 rebounds. She's the leader in steals with 1,074, and free throws with 2,004, and playoff games with 68. She's the postseason leader in points with 1,141, rebounds 598, steals 152, double-doubles 27, and minutes played with 2,310. She's also the first man or woman to record a quintuple double in 1997. The Fever reached the playoffs 13 times in her 15 active years, with 12 in a row in her 16 seasons with the Fever. She's a 4-time Olympic gold medalist. She's a finals champion and finals MVP. She was the 2011 WNBA MVP. She's a 10-time All-Star. She's a 5-time Defensive Player of the Year. She's a 7-time All-WNBA selection and 2002 Rookie of the Year. As she said in her Hall of Fame induction speech in 2020,
When people ask me what I miss the most about playing the game of basketball, I honestly can't tell you about a certain play. My best game, how many points I averaged, or anything of the like. What I remember is the relationships. From high school to college to the pros and the Olympics. As the legendary coach Pat Summitt said, no matter how many wins I've had, I remember the faces. I remember the laughter, jokes, and life lessons shared in good and bad moments.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Fire and White about my favorite WNBA player ever, Tamika Catchings. The whole reason behind this entire podcast is to ignite the stories of these legends of women's basketball. Come back next time.